Okay, so a short summary of Revision Express's section on spoken language and social groups. Let's talk you through some more key terms. So, to start off with, pidgins and creoles. Pidgin or creole is a very simplified form of language. It's where you have a limited range of grammatical structures and a limited range of vocabulary, such as me going down the beach, which a Barbadian might say, or only buy a cigarette, which they might also say, but they could be referring to the past, present, or the future. And instead of having a subject pronoun and an object pronoun, they'll only have the object pronoun, like me. So pidgins, they tend to be characterized by lack of grammatical structure and a limited range of grammar, and are spoken by a particular group of people which needs to communicate and which has probably had to learn a language in very limited time with very limited means. Occupational dialects. So an occupational dialect would be the type of language spoken by a particular profession. So for example, in teaching, you would hear of a certain specialized language spoken by teachers. We refer to the national curriculum, standards, key questions, and so on. And that would pertain particularly to the profession of being a teacher. Doctors will be doing the same, talking about prescriptions of medicines. Soil lawyers, they'll also have their own particular set of jargon that they will use. And whilst we're thinking about occupational dialects, let's also touch on language and social class. You've got four important theorists, Labov, Trudgill, Petit, and Milroy, who think about how different social classes have used language, what they tend to drop, the H's, the G's, how they tend to speak, paces, pauses, etc. It's also important to consider how male and female speakers use language, because it varies considerably. Put particular emphasis on the way females speak, using hedges, fillers, indirect requests, would you mind opening the window? And this is connected to their perceived, I say perceived, status in society as being a little bit subordinate. I'm not saying that this is true, but those hedges, those fillers, those indirect requests, the way women will tend to agree with the would you minds, could you, the hedging, that tends to characterize a lot of female language and is connected to their perceived status in society, say perceived. Right, so let's go back to occupational dialects. We touched on teachers, doctors, lawyers, and remember there's a particular jargon associated with each one. This jargon, it can be positive, it can include you, it can touch on a lot of features that you need to touch on quite quickly, or it can be so complex and so esoteric, which means known only to a few. That word is esoteric. I'll put it on the board. Esoteric, known only to a few, that you can't understand it. So jargon, it can include and it can exclude. All right. The chapter also touches on representation, which, if you remember from the other summary, is about linguistic determinism. If you don't have the language for a concept, you can't think it. So if we delete those sexist and offensive terms for our language, it means that those concepts of sexism and prejudice disappear from our thinking. The chapter also touches on sexism and how to get rid of it by removing those terms from social speaking, such as replacing fireman with firefighter, policeman with police officer, and so on and so forth, and challenging gender stereotypes, e.g. the doctor is always a man, a bin man is always a man, a bus driver is always a man, and so on. Remember, sexist terms are often insulting and patronizing and designed to exclude. So if we remove that terminology, our language becomes a lot more inclusive. That takes us on to thinking about political correctness. Political correctness is tied up with, as we said, linguistic determinism. If we can make our language very correct and inclusive and remove those exclusive features, such as referring to occupations by the suffix men, we make everything a lot easier and a lot more inclusive for people. Sometimes political correctness can go too far, and instead of saying someone is short, they became vertically challenged, bald became follically challenged, past experts, past masters became classics, a blackboard became a whiteboard, and so on. So sometimes it goes too far, but there's a point in it, and that point is to remove those prejudicial terms and hopefully adjust our thinking. So finally, that brings us on to taboo language. Taboo language will be the swear words and the profanities designed to shock. Very often there are two reasons for using these words. Number one, it's to do with rebellion, it's to do with attitude, it's to do with wanting to contradict or controvert a dominant social view, e.g. upsetting your parents or your grandparents. But two, it can also have a covert prestige, such as belonging to a gang, and part of being in that gang, part of that group identity, is you have a particular set of taboo words or swear words that means that you belong to that gang. I hope this is helpful. I'll upload it straight away. Good luck.